"Put on your seatbelt," snarls Ted Bundy to an 18-year-old who's just gotten into his Volkswagen Beetle after making the mortally serious mistake of believing he's a cop. Something is not right. He stinks of booze. Minutes later, he stops the car. "What are you doing?" she asks, now petrified. "This isn't the police station." He offers no response. He doesn't even look at her. The most evil man in America is about to have the fight of his life. Day 1, 1961. A teenage girl in Ted's neighborhood in Tacoma, Washington has gone missing. Her name is Anne Marie Burr. All the kids in the neighborhood are talking about it. Ted, who's a bit of an outcast among his peers, has a paper route that goes right past the girl's house. He's under no suspicion. He's just a kid. But someone who's familiar with young Ted knows there's something not quite right with him. This boy could kill. That's his Aunt Julia's contention. In 1949, when Ted was 3 and she was 15, she experienced something that would change her whole perspective on Ted. In the middle of the night, as she was sleeping, she was awoken to find Ted slipping butcher knives under her blanket. "What are you doing?" she asked him, startled, her face partly illuminated by the light on the landing. Ted said nothing. He just stood there grinning like a child maniac before calmly walking out of the room. For those first years of his life, Ted watched his grandfather fly into violent rages, swinging cats around by the tail, bashing his heavily depressed wife after indulging in a bit too much whiskey. Ted loved his father. He hated that his mother was so weak. Ted had been lied to, though. He thought his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. It was no place for a child to grow up. So Ted's sister, actually his mother, took him to Tacoma in Washington, and not long after met a cook named Johnny Bundy. They legally adopted Ted, making Johnny his father by law. Now Ted was Ted Bundy, and he'd soon have 4 siblings, 4 contenders for the attention of his parents. Now at 14, Ted is a skinny kid with feminine looks. He gets bullied by the older kids, and so in turn he bullies the younger kids. He sometimes takes them out to the woods, where he forces them to undress. One time he calls them over to show them how he strung up a cat by the neck. This is the genesis of the making of a monster. If he'd been properly treated then, you wouldn't be hearing the grisly details of the rest of the show. Year 3. Ted is now in high school. He has more friends, yet there's something insincere about him. He struggles to form close friendships, especially with girls, who he still watches from a distance. He's now into petty crime, stealing equipment so he can ski. When he's not trying to show off, he's alone, often reading violent detective magazines and looking over pictures of naked women in pornographic magazines. He hates his home life. He's ashamed that his adoptive father, Johnny, earns little money and drives cheap cars. Ted wants better clothes. When he goes out to Sears with his mom, he wants fancy things. During the night, he often listens to talk radio, pretending he is the rich and famous person being interviewed. He gets taken away with these fantasies, but somewhere in the back of his mind, he knows that will never be him. This is why the daydreaming of late has been taking a darker turn. He can't stop thinking about hurting people, hurting women. He thinks about sex a lot. He is, after all, in his teens, but his natural urges are often filled with unnatural violence. Try as he might, he can't stop these thoughts. One night, he's doing what he likes to do and sneaks around in the dark of his house when he comes across some of his mother's old documents. It's there he finds his birth certificate. It says, "Father unknown." Sometime later, he's with his friend Tony Storwick at Storwick's parents' beach house when they're talking about Ted's dad. Ted looks at Terry and says, "That's not actually my dad." Ted seems unbothered, but on the inside, he's raging with a fire he will never be able to quell. He's attractive, he just doesn't understand love or dating or girls in general. He knows he's supposed to like them, to talk about their bodies or cute faces or what he'd like to do with them, but he doesn't feel it. Not really. That's not to say he hates all girls. Not long ago, he saved Terry's sister Wendy from drowning. He literally saved her life. But another part of him wants to sneak into her room at night and pound her head with a hammer. Year 4. Ted is away at college. He's free from that stepfather. He's just spent $400 on a '58 Volkswagen Beetle, which he uses to go out on long trips by himself. In classes, he barely speaks. He has no friends, male or female. He still feels like an outcast, but then after walking into an international affairs lecture on China, he realizes that being an outcast could be pretty cool. Year 5. He's learning to speak Chinese. He imagines himself an expert on Asia, a specialist on everything exotic, or what he thinks is exotic. He switches to the University of Washington to study Asian studies, and with his new skills, he meets his first love, a student impressed with his language skills and expert use of Chinese chopsticks. But for some reason, when they're alone in his apartment at night, he can't touch her. It's as if he's afraid that any kind of sexual advance will lead him into temptation, those dark, violent urges he's had all his young life. But this girl soon gets sick of him. Instead of acting like a man or taking her in his arms, he'll sneak up behind her, tap her on the shoulder, and then run away. What's wrong with this jerk? They aren't 13 anymore. She dumps him. He can't understand it. After all, he's tried to be nice. He's tried to be normal. It hasn't worked, and so now it's time to be himself. Year 6. On June 23rd, an article in the Spokane Daily Chronicle reads, "An airline stewardess is found beaten to death and one of her roommates critically injured in their Queen Anne Hill apartment." Ted's working as a busboy, and then when he can't hack that anymore, he gets a job stacking shelves at a Safeway store. He drives his car all over the place, seeing his grandparents, the grandfather he still adores, who he knows now is his grandfather and not his father. By this time, he's already seen his official birth records in Burlington. The article in the newspaper continues to describe that Lonnie Trumbull, 20, was found in her bed bludgeoned to death. Lisa Wick was found in her bed almost beaten to death. Both were in their nightclothes. Wick's hair was still in curlers. There's no sign of a struggle. Someone had sneaked into their room and just gone crazy on them. Very soon, murders with this MO and signature will be a common thing. Ted reads this newspaper. He smiles when he puts it down, thinking about how tonight he's going to go out and play one of his favorite games, letting car tires down and seeing how the owner, always a young woman, deals with it as he watches from a distance. This is practice. Year 7. Ted's now back in Seattle at the University of Washington, and this is where he meets Elizabeth Klepfer and her 3-year-old child. He seems clever and charming, and he gets along with her kid, although the games he plays with the girl do sometimes seem strange in nature. Elizabeth has no idea of Ted Bundy's true nature, but she likes what she sees at first. He's a man on the up and up, or at least it looks that way. Year 8. Ted still likes to drive around, seeing relatives in various parts of the country. He's in the Philadelphia area when 2 students, both age 19, have breakfast at a cafeteria and are later found tied to trees, both dead. The girls, Susan Marguerite Davis and Elizabeth Perry, had their hair fastened to the branches. Both had been stabbed to death. This happened on a weekend that Ted shouldn't have been able to drive, seeing as his Aunt Julia had seen him that weekend with his leg in a cast. He told her he'd been in a car accident. No records exist of such an accident, and let's just say Ted wearing casts is about to become a very common occurrence. Year 9. Ted is doing well in his new psychology major. If he's honest with himself, he's chosen psychology because he's so mixed up about his own dark thoughts and his dual personality. In one of his first papers written about schizophrenia, he gets an almost perfect grade. He's been working on a hotline advising people that are going through the darkest parts of their lives to not hurt themselves. He prides himself on being good at speaking to women, especially women who have abusive husbands or women who've been abandoned. Ted keeps them on the line, sometimes for up to an hour, calming them down, letting them know someone loves them and that life can improve. This makes Ted feel elated, knowing he can save lives as well as take them. He muses that somehow, as ironic as it sounds, both actions are kind of the same. Year 10. He's a man of the community, one of the good guys. One evening, he's with a woman named Frida in her kitchen having coffee, and a fly flies into the kitchen. She's about to swat it with the newspaper when Ted jumps up and screams, "Don't kill it!" He makes sure it can escape through a window. Frida, who really likes Ted, later tells her friend he's so gentle. One of his colleagues on the hotline is Anne Rule, a woman who in the years to come will have a lot to say about Ted Bundy. Right now, all she knows is that he spends a hell of a lot of time traveling around in his beloved Beetle. Joyce LePage, 21, goes missing after leaving her friend's car close to the University of Washington. She's been stabbed 3 times. Her body will be found soon. A young woman tells police she saw a yellow Volkswagen Beetle on campus that night LePage went missing. To make ends meet, Ted drives a delivery truck for a medical supplies company called Pedline. He gets along well with the boss until he's caught stealing supplies. The boss is confused when he sees Ted has been plundering his firm of plaster casting materials. What a strange thing to steal, he thinks. But that's only because he doesn't know anything about Ted's burgeoning hobby. Year 11. Ted gets a job working for a Republican governor on his election campaign. He's now going places, or it seems that way. He's dated a few women already, but none of them really knows who he is. He's an enigma, a dog without a home, who can be obedient, cute, and nasty all at the same time. Elizabeth Klepfer adores him, despite knowing she probably shouldn't. Something is not quite right about Ted Bundy, even if he looks like a hot prospect in Republican politics who's just been accepted into law school. Ted's also been seeing his former flame, the one that dumped him before. After spending months re-charming her, enticing her to become devoted to him, he just calls her out of the blue and dumps her right when she thought they were going someplace. Call it revenge. Still, things have ended worse. She has her head intact. Rejection is about as good as it gets with Ted Bundy. Ted is now in a testing phase of what he thinks will be perfect crimes. He's following women around without being seen. He knows he looks middle-class and respectable. He knows it makes him invisible, giving him the anonymity any American psycho could wish for. In the parlance of the FBI, he's organized. However, it'll be some time before the FBI gets serious about profiling killers. He'll also become a lot less organized as time goes on. To the world around him, Ted's a law student who's worked with top politicians. He's an educated young man with good looks and an expansive vocabulary. He's the kind of guy you want to take home to meet your parents, the kind of person you'd stop to offer assistance to in the street, just as 17-year-old Rita Lorraine Jolly might have done when she went out walking near her home in Oregon. The same goes with Vicki Lynn Haller, who also goes missing in Oregon around this time, just as Bundy is going on those weekend journeys around the Pacific Northwest in his car. Both women have never been found, but we know that it was at this point in Ted's life that he said his urge to kill had been so irrepressible that murdering women is all he thought about. Still, in the 70s, during what's sometimes called the golden age of American serial killing, Ted Bundy was one of many so-called lust killers on the loose. Year 12. Ted loves politics. He loves getting invited out for dinner with bigwigs. Being among politicians, he feels empowered. They're driven like him. They'll do or say anything to get what they want. In short, Ted was drawn to psychopaths. He'll later say this line, "Politics was perfect. You can move among various strata of society. You can talk to people whom you'd otherwise have no access." Ted also understands something very important. Cops don't think killers go to university and work for politicians. Ted reads detective books too, which give him all the forensic details he needs to know how to get away with what he thinks are perfect murders. And he's about to get a lot of practice. Year 13, month 1. Only he fails when it comes to killing 18-year-old Karen Sparks, a beautiful dancer who studies at the University of Washington. As with most of his victims, he surveilled her first, seen her get in and out of cars, seen where she goes for classes and where she sleeps. One night, he slips into her dorm where she's fast asleep and with furious anger beats her with a metal rod. She survives, but with horrific injuries. The only reason she isn't dead is her roommate, a guy named Chuck, who talked in his sleep, making Ted think the guy had woken up. Meanwhile, his relationship with Elizabeth, his co-worker, is somewhat constrained at times. For her, anyway. She knows Ted steals things. His house is full of stuff he's taken. She doesn't much like this. One time she joked about telling the cops. He said to her without any irony, "If you do, I'll break your neck." One night, while in her apartment, he asks to tie her up, and she lets him do it. She's taken aback by how fast he pulls out a pair of stockings from one of her drawers. He must have known where they were. Ted is terrifying in many ways, but she is very insecure. She's willing to do as he asks because she always thinks he'll leave her for his new posh Republican buddies. It's around this time that Ted writes a paper for the Seattle Crime Commission on how women can protect themselves from abusive and violent men. About a week later, he's with Elizabeth when he chases down a purse snatcher in the street and holds him until the cops turn up. Ted gets in the Seattle Times for his good deed. It won't be the last time he features in this newspaper. The story explains, police said Bundy chased the man on foot in First Avenue Northeast and caught him as he was stuffing the purse into a garbage can. Soon after, Ted is given a job at the King County Office of Law and Justice Planning to study why criminals commit more crimes after they've been released from prison. What catches Ted's attention is how police departments from various jurisdictions often fail to work together. Criminals can be known to one police department, so they just move cities to commit more crimes. It makes the life of crime that much easier. This, of course, is fabulous news for Ted. Now he has women's safety campaign experience, some forensic knowledge, and he knows how police departments work. Could a murderer ask for more? Yes. Month 2. Ted sometimes works for Ross Davis, a Republican politician. He's in charge of looking at campaign costs for Davis. The two become friends. Ross's wife, Sarah, loves that Ted is so good with her 2 young kids and how he always talks fondly about his beloved parents back home. One day, Ted goes over to their house to show off his new '68 Beetle. At one point, Ted has to get something from the trunk, and as he's rummaging through what looks like loads of junk, Ross notices something peculiar. Ted has a pair of handcuffs in there. Ted's currently in law school, but it's not what he expected. It's a second-rate place full of people he considers losers. None of them are smart, and they look like they'll never come to anything, unlike him, a budding politician. The problem is the majority of them are receiving much better grades than Ted, and this makes him furious. Someone will have to pay. One night, Ted enters the dorm of Linda Ann Healy. He bludgeons her to death in her sleep, then dresses her in jeans and a white blouse and takes her body away. Why? Because Ted Bundy is not usually a sadistic killer. He's a power control killer. He doesn't want his victims to suffer in front of him as he torments them. He wants power over them. And what more power can you have than being the master of their bodies? He's playing God. He likes to get the killing part done quickly, preferably when they're not looking at him. He sometimes stays with them as they decompose. He washes them and combs their hair. He revisits them until decomposition makes the stench too much for him. He also sometimes takes heads for trophies. Month 3. The Evergreen State College is his next hunting ground. The victim is 19-year-old Donna Gail Manson. Manson is wearing a red, orange, and green striped shirt. She's on her way to a jazz concert on campus. All we know is she doesn't get there. Ted gets to her first. Instead of bashing her in her sleep, this time Ted uses his psychological manipulation routine on her to win her confidence. He's been perfecting this, and soon he'll think he's the best there ever was. Month 4. The next victim is 18-year-old Susan Elaine Rancourt, who goes missing at Central Washington State College. Ted's been skulking around this college all week, trying to pick up quite a few girls. One of them was 21-year-old Kathleen Clara DeLivio. As she sees Ted with his arm in a cast while trying his darndest to carry some books, he politely asks her if she's on the way to the library and can she please give him some much-needed assistance. Why not, she thinks. He's a well-dressed, well-spoken man in need. She's close enough for him to attack, but in her good fortune, she never turns her back. Ted normally only strikes when backs are turned. He doesn't even want to know their names. It's hard to kill them when they have names. It humanizes them. Ted wants a nameless body to have mastery over, not real people with real lives. This breaks the fantasy. Ted purposefully drops some books, but again, DeLivio doesn't turn her back. She helps him carry them over in the direction of the library, trying to chat. Although chatting is the last thing Ted wants to do. He's thinking, just turn around for God's sake. When she sees he's not actually heading to the library, she parts ways with him. He calls her back and asks if she can help him get the books to his car, pointing toward a brown VW Beetle in the parking lot. DeLivio might be kind, but she's in no mood to play mother to some guy. As she walks away again, Ted tries one last thing. "I've dropped my keys," he shouts. "If you could be so kind as to just help me find them." Now she's suspicious. Like many people who've met Ted, her intuition tells her something is not quite right about this guy. She agrees to help but keeps a yard away and never moves in front of him. She then spots the keys that Ted just dropped on purpose. He gives her that look as if to say, "Come on, be a darling, would you, and pick them up? I've got books in my hands." She just looks at him as if to say, "No way. Good luck with your arm," she says, and walks away. That saves her life. She later explains all this to the cops. Her description of him will be vital down the line. Jane Curtis is also unfortunate enough to meet Ted Bundy just a few days later. She bumps into him around 9 p.m. one evening close to the library. This time, Ted pretty much throws the books in front of her and then apologizes, talking about his sling and how it's hard to carry things. She picks some of them up, and they walk toward the library, Ted telling her that he's really grateful. He gives her a strange look and she notices how dark his eyes are. It's as if the pupils are taking up all of the iris. He's actually looking at her, imagining what her decapitated head would look like in his hands. "Skiing accident," Ted says as she looks at the splint on his fingers. This is more manipulation. Not only does he look vulnerable, but skiing must mean he has money. It means he's middle class, another reason for her to trust him. But Curtis is having none of it. Not only does she think this guy is weird, but that splint on his finger looks totally fake. So when he asks her over to his car and for her to kindly open the door, she refuses. He does it himself, and she sees the passenger seat is missing. That's Ted's way of making pushing unconscious bodies into your car that much easier. Again, Curtis thinks this scene is too weird. When he asks her to get in the car with the books, she just leaves, even as he's moaning that his arm just started hurting a lot more. As she walks off in the distance, Ted spits out curse words. He rips off the cast and throws it into the back seat. Someone is going to pay for this. Month 6 through 10. Ted's hardly been attending classes at all. He has other things on his mind. He's been scouting victims, staying up late, going out early in the morning looking for prey. Then he finds someone that fits perfectly into his catalog of obsessions. Her name is Roberta Kathleen Parks. Like most of his victims, she's pretty. She's obviously educated since he knows she's a student at Oregon State University. He doesn't know she's a religious studies student, but the smaller details have never bothered Ted. The day he takes her, her father has a heart attack. She knows nothing of this bad news at the time when she unwittingly gets into Ted's car. His victims so far have been from the Seattle area, but this young woman is studying some 250 miles away. He knows that detectives tend to have what's called linkage blindness. Ted knows from his love of detective magazines that murderers who kill again and again There's not yet the expression serial killer in the police lexicon. Tend to kill near home or at least in one area. Ted is branching out. While most killers lack the confidence to kill in new areas, sometimes just because they don't know the roads or escape routes, Ted is supremely confident. He's spreading his wings. He's going to be a lust killer like none other that came before him. He's going to make it hard for the cops, very hard, despite the fact numerous people have already given a fairly accurate description of his appearance and have talked about a VW Beetle near crime scenes. Ted's not been seeing much of Elizabeth, not just because of the long-distance nature of the relationship. After all, Ted loves to drive, but he also seems preoccupied with something all the time. Even when they're sleeping together, he'll disappear for the weekend. Just the other day, he went out, not saying where he was going, and then flew back into her room explaining that he left his crowbar behind. When she looked at one of his pockets, a surgical glove was hanging out. Month 11. Ted makes his first big mistake. It involves a pair of handcuffs and a really tough Mormon girl. An 18-year-old woman named Carol DeRonch parks her Chevrolet Camaro in front of the Sears store at the Fashion Place Mall in Murray, Utah. It's evening, and outside is misty and cold. Notably, the town connects with another town where a 17-year-old girl had gone missing 3 weeks prior. She's at the mall to buy a birthday gift for her cousin when she's approached by a guy that identifies himself as Officer Roseland of the Murray Police. DeRonch comes from a very strict Mormon family, and she's always been told you should respect authority. So when Ted tells her there's been a theft in the car park, she doesn't question it, even though Ted stinks of alcohol and is wearing patent leather shoes not typically worn by cops. His hair is really greasy too. This man looks nothing like an officer of the law. But being the polite, respectful girl she is, she follows him to the car, which he says is the one where the theft has taken place. When she sees this is not the case, he tells her they need to go to the small substation, whereupon she finally has the courage to ask for ID. Ted very quickly flashes his wallet, not giving her much time to see. When they get to the substation, DeRonch immediately thinks the place looks more like a laundromat. That's because it is. Ted then says they'll have to go to the main station together, and that's when she gets suspicious. Nonetheless, what if he is a cop and she refuses to go? She'll be the talk of the town for resisting arrest. Her parents will be so ashamed. When they get to the police car, she finds a tatty Volkswagen Beetle that has a large rip on the rear seat. The car is a total mess. How could a cop be driving this, she thinks. But the authority figure talking to her sounds believable, so she gets in. "Fasten your seatbelt," says Ted, and it seems the angels smile on DeRonch at that second because something in her head tells her not to do that. He pulls over at the side of a school. She's now scared out of her wits. The man is definitely not a cop. "What are you doing?" she says, telling him this is not a police station. He grabs her hand, slipping on a pair of handcuffs. "What are you doing?" she screams. Ted barely even looks at her. He says nothing. It's a good thing he only has one handcuff on her because she's able to claw at him like a wild animal. She scratches him so hard her fingernails tear off his skin. "I'll blow your head off," Ted shouts. And she just hits him more, kicking out, using her elbows. Out of nowhere, Ted pulls out a tire iron and tries to bring it down on her head, only for her to grab it just in time. She then manages to get free from his grip and pushes herself out of the car, landing in the street with just one shoe on. Screaming, thinking this man will soon be on top of her, she runs up the road, only to hear not a panting man on her tail, but the car screeching into a U-turn. DeRonch keeps running. She sees headlights in the distance. The elderly couple Wilbur and Mary Walsh are, as usual, driving at the recommended speed. It's foggy outside, after all. Suddenly, in the glare of their lights, they see a girl waving her arms. As they slow almost to a halt, the girl pulls open the door on Mary's side. At first, they think this could be an attack, but when they read the fright on the girl's face, they know that they've likely just saved someone from something terrible. Trembling, crying, handcuffs still dangling from her wrist, DeRonch jumps into the back of the car. Then they make their way to the real Murray Police Station. No survivor has been this close up to Ted Bundy before and lived to tell the tale in such full detail. This matters a lot. A couple of hours later, about 1,500 people are stuffed into an auditorium at Viewmont High School to watch the drama club perform The Redhead. Just before it gets going, a good-looking chap walks up to the drama teacher, Raylan Shepard, in the hallway. He looks well-dressed in his patent leather shoes, but something creeps her out. Maybe it's the way he's looking at her breasts and neck. He almost looks like a hungry animal. The strange man asks her to go to the parking lot to identify a car. She seems taken aback by the request. He tells her, "I've had my eye on you. I know you have time to come outside and identify the car." Creepily, he then gops at her neck again and tells her, "You have really nice hair." A compliment from a good-looking dude on any other occasion might be welcomed, but not from this man. She leaves only later to see the guy in the auditorium watching the last part of the play. He's sitting right behind Dean and Belva Kent, the parents of Deborah, who's also sitting close by. 16-year-old Kathleen Ricks is also in the audience. Raylan doesn't know it, but this creep has asked her to go outside to the parking lot too. At the intermission, Deborah tells her parents she's going to pick up her brother at the ice skating rink. "Don't be late getting back," says the mom, who will never speak to her or see her daughter again. Outside next to her car, police will find a key, a very, very important key. Can you guess what it unlocks? After Kent's disappearance becomes a police matter, a local newspaper runs a story featuring a criminal profiler. The story talks about the Utah abductor, with the profiler saying this guy is likely a Jekyll and Hyde type character, meaning he can gain people's trust as he's well-spoken and smart, the kind of guy you trust after only meeting him once. He's also an animal, says the profiler, a brutal beast living behind a mask of normalcy. Now police in various parts of the Midwest have data on file about a suspicious guy who drives a Volkswagen. They have plenty of accounts about a man with his arm in a sling. What all these departments don't have is connectivity. One witness said a man had approached her and, in what seemed like a British or Canadian accent, had introduced himself as Ted. Now they have a name, too. 5 witnesses say they've been approached in Lake Sammamish State Park near Seattle just recently. This guy was wearing a tennis outfit, another of Ted's ploys to look affluent and harmless. They said he'd asked them to help unload a sailboat from his bronze-colored Volkswagen Beetle. He was struggling, his arm being in a sling and all. 4 of them refused, but one went with him to his car only to run away when she realized there was no boat. That same day, a pretty 23-year-old Janice Ann Ott agreed to help him as she was sunbathing in her bikini in the park. Ted had said to her, "Excuse me, could you help me move my sailboat? I can't do it myself because I broke my arm." She replied, "Only if I get a ride in that sailboat. I don't know how to sail." Ted laughed and said, "No problem, he'll teach her." Not long after, Ted was in his apartment with her doing what he loved best. Well, he took the head, not the rest of her. It's hard to walk around with bodies. Heads might not afford complete gratification, but they're at least convenient. Later that same day, 19-year-old Denise Marie Naslund was in a restroom. She was with 2 friends, feeling quite high since they'd all taken Valium. She came out of the restroom after splashing her face with water when a polite, handsome man asked her for a favor. She agreed, and when she turned her back, an iron bar came crashing down on her head. 8 weeks later, some hunters found her body in the woods. This was massive news. A predator was abducting and killing pretty women, almost all of them having a certain look and educational background. Sketches appeared in the newspapers again. Police knew this guy wore his arm in a cast. They'd been told about the Beetle numerous times. They now had the name Ted on file. The only problem was they were blind to the fact that educated men who worked for politicians were capable of killing. Year 14, month 2. Elizabeth had spoken to the cops, not to one department, but to King County and also Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. She still kind of loves Ted. They speak on the phone a lot. But after seeing those sketches and reading about a Volkswagen Beetle, the fact the guy is likely handsome and well-spoken, well, she just put 2 and 2 together. At one point, her colleague throws her a copy of the Seattle Times, which contains the latest composite drawing, and says, "Don't you think that looks like someone you know?" Silence. He then asks, "Doesn't your Ted have a VW?" She also knows he always goes missing. She's seen women's panties in his drawers, seen the crowbar. It just has to be him. She doesn't see him much these days. When she does, it's always weird. Just recently, she woke up in the middle of the night and he was sitting over her staring at her. When she complained, she immediately apologized, fearing she'd upset him. She'll later tell people, "When I felt his love, I was on top of the world. When I felt nothing from Ted, I felt that I was nothing." Month 3. Ted is upset that the body of his winter victim in Colorado is now too decomposed for what he considers his intimate time. He's taken this young woman, Karen Eileen Campbell, and later hidden her body in the woods. Now that winter's coming to an end, he wants a new body, a new love. So he abducts 26-year-old Julie Cunningham from near a tavern in Colorado. The ski instructor has just been through a rough breakup when she bumps into Ted. After getting off the telephone with her mother, she's on her way to the bar for a few drinks. That's when she sees a man hobbling down the street carrying a pair of ski boots. She offers to help, and off they go toward Ted's car. When they get there, she turns her back. He hits her over the head with such force that it almost kills her. He then shoves her in the trunk, drives about 90 miles, and stops the car. As he opens the trunk, she's partly conscious, looking at him with existential fear in her eyes. That's when he strangles her. He just leaves her body and only returns a few months later to bury it. In the next 3 months, he kills 3 more women, 12, 15, and 25 years old. The victims are in Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. He's still banking on that linkage blindness to evade interest from the cops. Cops have now heard the name Ted many times. One of his former colleagues at the Department of Emergency Services has called them and explicitly said the guy you are looking for is her friend, Ted. Month 7. Detectives in Washington State do something novel. They put names into a database, a computer that has been a payroll machine in another life. The cops are getting in the region of 200 calls a day, so this computer helps. They put the name Ted into that database and also add Volkswagen Beetle. Plus, they input all the names of all the victims and the victims' friends in there. Thousands of names pop up, but one name is on 4 different lists. That is Ted Bundy. He's literally the top of the pile. But Ted isn't in Washington right now, he's in Utah. Ted decides to get baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This makes him happy. He's not such a bad guy, God loves him. He's no saint, but not all bad, he thinks. Month 8. At 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, August 16, 1975, Sergeant Robert A. Hayward spots a gray Volkswagen pass by him as he's sitting in his patrol car in a Salt Lake City suburb. He sees the same car a bit later, so he grows suspicious. This looks like a prowler. Then he goes after the car, only for it to take off. They both run a stop sign when Hayward flashes the spotlight at the car. The car attempts to get away and then pulls over at a gas station. Volkswagen Beetles are not known for their speed. Hayward asks to see the man's license. He reads under his breath, Theodore Robert Bundy, 565 First Avenue, Salt Lake City, Utah, date of birth 11/24/46. He tells Hayward he's just been to see the movie The Towering Inferno. Hayward peers inward to see a crowbar and other tools, which he thinks is strange, just because the guy doesn't look like a mechanic. And who drives around with tools so late? Then after some deputies arrive on the scene, they spot what look like some kind of crime kit. It's Ted's murder kit. They see a crowbar, some handcuffs, some rope, an ice pick, some trash bags, a ski mask, and another mask made from pantyhose. Not the kind of stuff someone takes to the movies, but at first they only think this guy could be a burglar. Back at the police station, a very large-bodied detective, Jerry Thompson, starts to join the dots. He not only remembers very clearly the DeRange case, but he recalls a phone call that Utah police received from a woman named Elizabeth Klepfer. He's aware that whoever killed Deborah Kent could be the same man who tried to abduct DeRange. At this point, Ted still thinks the cops are stupid and they just got lucky. He doesn't think they'll get him though, not for what he's really done. Over 20 police agencies in 5 states are looking for him, and yet here he is, confident as anything, knowing the police are far from seeing the big picture. After searching Ted's house, they have no choice but to let him go. They have nothing on him. It's just a pity they didn't find all those photographs Ted has hidden, the ones of the bodies of his victims, his treasured trophy collection. Month 9. Now Ted's being monitored 24/7. Cops in Utah fly out to Seattle. They speak to Elizabeth face to face. She tells them she always did wonder why her lover kept crutches and slings around the house when he wasn't injured. She tells them that he always has plenty of plaster of Paris and that he definitely isn't into modeling. She says he isn't a surgeon and yet always has surgical gloves around. He has big knives and meat cleavers, and yet she can't remember a time he cooked her dinner. As for the bags of women's clothes, well, Ted isn't the charitable type. In fact, come to think of it, it was really strange that she'd often wake up and find him staring at her neck. And why did he always get so angry when she would tell him she wanted a haircut? Around this time, Ted sells his Volkswagen Beetle to a local student. Now police from all departments where Ted has left a trail of blood get talking. The guy has to be a killer. They get hold of his car from the student and impound it. They find women's hair in there. Month 10. They arrest Ted again. Witnesses from all over come to the station, including DeRange, who has no problem picking this odious man out of a lineup. You don't easily forget the face of the man who wanted to murder you. As for the handcuffs she was wearing after her escape, the key to them is the key police found next to the car of a missing girl, Deborah Kent. Her body has not been found. It won't until 2015. But the key is key to charging Ted with something serious. They now have enough to at least charge him with the DeRange kidnapping. It's a start. Still, they can't pin the bigger crimes on him and have no choice but to let him go when his parents pay his $15,000 bail. Strangely, he now spends most of his time at either his parents' house or Elizabeth's house. Psycho Ted has no problem convincing her this is all a big mix-up. Month 11. The cops are certain they have their man, a maniac who's been on a killing spree throughout several states. Detectives meet in Aspen at what will later be called the Aspen Summit. Year 15. Month 2. At trial, after DeRange testifies, Ted is found guilty of her kidnapping. Month 5. Ted is told he'll be spending the next 15 years of his life in the Utah State Prison for the kidnapping case. He's laughing inside. Month 10. Ted is caught in the prison yard in the midst of an escape. When guards pull him out of the bush he's hiding behind, they find what they later call an escape kit. He's somehow gotten his hands on a road map, some airline schedules, and even a social security card. Ted still has people believing his innocence, including Elizabeth, who he's brainwashed again. The same month, police have enough to charge him with one of the murders. They know he killed more people, a lot more, but they have to find proof. Year 16, month 7. Seemingly, you just can't hold a bad man down. Since Ted is representing himself by law, when he defends himself, he doesn't have to wear shackles and handcuffs. This he knows, which will be of considerable help soon. He's been getting a lot of support so far. He's written to his Republican friends saying how he's the victim of a setup or at least police incompetence. He said he's scared for his life. Inmates are hardly nice to men that hurt women. His posh friends create the Ted Bundy Defense Fund and raise about $4,000. As his trial approaches, he puts sticky notes in Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. He means to show the court what police oppression can do to a man. He'll later admit that he was so proud of himself for such trickery. In jail, Ted eats only healthy food. He has a plan. He's working out and getting strong. He's jumping from the top bunk to practice landing well. He's gotten his hands on maps, and he's memorizing every single street and mountain road in Aspen. He's back in court on June 7th.
First degree, 3 counts, attempted murder in the first degree. Design.
He already knows that a window in the courthouse will be open. He knows he can safely jump from a second-story window. He's just had a haircut, so he looks quite different. He's hidden a red bandana in his pocket. He's also attached some matches and some vitamin pills to a piece of string and hidden them on his body. Under his brown corduroys, he has white tennis shorts. On top, he has a t-shirt hidden under some long johns, and over them is a turtleneck sweater. He's also wearing hiking socks under his boots. He's ready for a long walk in the mountains. Even though he looks much bulkier than usual, the guards taking him to the courthouse don't seem to notice. One of the officers remarks about the lack of handcuffs, to which another officer says confidently, "He's not going to try to get away from us." During recess, Ted heads to the library, where he sees his chance. He jumps out of the open window. Minutes later, a woman walks into the courthouse and, with a shocked look on her face, tells an officer, "A man just jumped out of the second-floor window and ran away."
Out of this second-story window at the front of the Pitkin County Courthouse this morning. He was scheduled for a court appearance and apparently had been locked into the law library by sheriff's deputies.
Ted is running as fast as his legs can take him, tearing off the top layer of his clothes. He jumps over a fence, runs down an alleyway through Main Street, past a restaurant where 2 guys give him funny looks, and after running down another street, he finds a gorge where the Roaring Fork River runs through Aspen. A lot of people see him. His heart is beating out of his chest, but he's free, and he's staying free. When he gets to the foot of a mountain, he starts climbing. He gets so far up that when he looks around, he's got a great view of Aspen. Bliss. The Seattle Times publishes a story the next day. Theodore R. Bundy, former Seattleite, charged with murder in Colorado, and a suspect in murders of young women in Washington State and Utah, leaped to freedom from the second floor of the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado today. An extensive manhunt began. About 100 officers and others were hunting him in nearby mountains and throughout the town. Ted is high up in the mountains, loving the views. He feels so content. He keeps telling himself, "I'm not a fugitive. I'm not Ted Bundy. It's so peaceful up here." He wonders about his mother and Elizabeth, but mostly just enjoys the view, ignorant of the fact that the tracking dogs sent to find him have picked up on the trail of a female hiker going in another direction. 6 days later, hungry and cold and with a sprained ankle, he heads back down into town, and after stealing a car near Aspen Golf Course, he's picked up again. Man, what a great experience that was while it lasted, he thinks. Month 11. One of Ted's former colleagues believes his innocence. She's madly in love with him. Her name is Carol Ann Boone. At this point, she is smuggling money in for Ted, which he'll need later. He's on a strict diet. He's already lost about 1/5 his total body weight. He's skinny as anything, which will help him squeeze between bars for his next escape. Thanks to Boone, he has cash and a hacksaw blade. Ted also has the floor plans of the jail, so he knows there's a crawl space above his cell, and he knows from there he can get into the chief jailer's room. Month 12. He does just that during the Christmas break after getting onto the roof. He gets into the chief jailer's civilian clothes and takes off once more. Before fleeing, he's placed a bunch of books under the sheets so the guards might think he's fast asleep. This time, he's not looking for natural beauty, he wants blood. Year 16, month 1. After stealing cars and hitchhiking, Ted makes it all the way to Florida. He gets a room close to the Florida State University campus, which we might call a very bad case of putting the cat among the pigeons. For a short time, he gets by stealing wallets and shoplifting, but he knows this won't work for long. What he wants now is one final dance with darkness. He's furious at everything, including his $80 a month room, which is filthy and situated in an apartment block he considers is for lowlifes. This is the same man who, to get money, breaks into a 1971 Toyota to steal a new Panasonic TV, a Sony transistor radio, and a Smith Corona typewriter. He then gets into a 1976 Mustang and takes a golf umbrella and a notebook. Why? He can't really sell them. He's just addicted to stealing and always has been. For sustenance, he shoplifts jars of peanut butter, cans of sardines, and other small items he can fit in his pockets. Shortly after, he steals a chicken and a potato salad from the deli part of a supermarket that he's seen close to the sorority house. As 3 female students are fast asleep in their beds at the sorority house, Ted sneaks into their rooms one by one. He beats them wildly over the head, knocking them unconscious with a hammer. He rips at one girl with his teeth. Some things are unmentionable, but even for Ted, this is overkill. These girls end up looking like a ravenous bear had attacked them. 2 of the 3 victims survive, but with horrific life-changing injuries. He walks 8 blocks and attacks another woman who also barely survives. Later that night, Ted walks back to his apartment. There, as he's standing outside on some cement steps, the 2 other residents bump into him. Later in court, they testify he was in complete silence. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there. That's Ted, relaxed and satiated after murder. Ted will explain in time to an interviewer what it was like becoming this wild beast of a man. He said the more an actor acts in a role, the better he becomes at it. The more he's apt to feel comfortable in it, to be able to do things spontaneously. Month 2. Ted kills Kimberly Diane Leach after abducting her from Lake City Junior High School in Florida. One minute she told a teacher in her homeroom she was just going to get a purse, and the next she was gone. She'd fallen for that old Ted Bundy confidence trick. For this, her throat is slit with a sharp knife. A few days later, out on the prowl looking for victims or people to steal from, Ted's driving a stolen car when he's pulled over. This isn't long after he's run from a Holiday Inn after failing to pay for his breakfast with stolen credit cards. He's also been thrown out of a bar after trying to take money from people's handbags. The bartender spotted him, and soon Ted was being chased away by bouncers. There was literally nowhere for him to go now. He's drunk out of his mind, and he knows this is the end of his time on the run. The cop who pulls him over questions him outside the car, during which time Ted kicks him in the legs and runs as the officer fires warning shots into the air. He doesn't get far and is soon tackled to the ground and thrown into the back of the police car. The Florida cop has no idea who he has in his car. He's not aware that he is currently carrying one of the USA's most vile creatures. Ted knows the jig is up, and that's why he says to the officer, "I wish you'd killed me." Month 5. Ted writes a letter to a local newspaper. It says, "I've killed no one. Outside of a few minor thefts, I've done nothing wrong. What the media reports now is completely one-sided, nothing but accusation and insinuation, spoon-fed by investigative authorities." Month 8. The evidence is stacking up. More bodies are given the Ted Bundy signature. Ted calls for his lawyer. From his cell, he says, "I want you to explore the possibility of a plea bargain." Year 17. The newspapers write about Ted Bundy in a way they certainly wouldn't write about other killers or even drug dealers or street hustlers. The tone in the article feels almost exculpatory. The New York Times writes a story with the headline, "All-American Boy on Trial." The article says he seemed so relaxed in the courtroom, which some onlookers explained was natural for a young man with 2 years' experience in law school. The general gist is, how could such a nice young man in a suit with a college education do such bad things? It will be decades until academic papers and books start talking about how many psychopaths live among us in positions of power. Year 18. The Miami Herald runs the headline, "Nation's Eyes on Bundy." The story starts, Theodore Robert Bundy, a native of Vermont, a resident of Washington, a convict of Utah, an escapee of Colorado, a prisoner of Florida, is now perhaps the most famous criminal defendant in America. During the trial in Florida, Ted marries Boone. He's read in some law book that despite his precarious position, this is actually possible during a trial.
Carol, do you want to marry me? I want to marry you. How do you want to marry me?
The marriage takes place after witnesses have said things that make the jury's skin crawl. One survivor explains, "I had 5 skull fractures and multiple contusions in my head. The 8th nerve was damaged, and I lost hearing in my left ear and my equilibrium. And I had a broken jaw, and my left shoulder was pulled out of joint." Boone doesn't believe a word of it, or at least she thinks that her Ted wouldn't do that. Year 19. Outside the court, protesters hold placards. One reads, "Ted should be dead." Another says, "Juice Ted's caboose." The court hears that Ted was a traumatized youth. His Aunt Julia, now a grown woman, explains how he used to put those butcher knives in her blanket as she slept at night. Psychiatrists talked about his depressed grandmother and violent grandfather. This is what created Ted's bipolarity, they say. Ted is handed the death penalty. It's the 3rd time this has been handed down to him, but this will be the last one. Ted is now a celebrity killer despite being the most wretched human on earth that has caused unimaginable pain to so many families.
His trial has attracted a steady and unusual stream of spectators. Robin Lloyd of station WTVJ reports.
Each day, the courtroom is filled with spectators drawn by a fascination with Theodore Bundy.
The courtroom is always filled with women who have dressed and cut their hair in the style of Ted's preferred victims. These women are being called Bundy groupies. Even after the heinous things Ted has done, the judge seems to take pity on him, speaking in a way he certainly wouldn't speak to a poor thief or a consumer of heroin. Ted is also still fooling people, continuing to portray an image of innocence, as is evidenced when the judge tells him,
"Lawyer, I'd love to have you practice in front of me, but you went another way, partner. Take care of yourself. I don't have any animosity to you. I want you to know that. Take care of yourself."
Thank you.
Court will be in recess. Remain seated, please.
It's a tragedy for this court to see such a total waste of humanity. You're a bright young man. You've made a good lawyer. Take care of yourself. I don't have any animosity towards you. I want you to know that. Take care. Year 20. Ted's daughter Rose is born. This comes as a surprise to everyone. Some people believe Ted and Carol Boone sneaked off to have sex either when the guard wasn't looking or when the guard was away. Others believe Ted had squirted his life juice into a container and passed it on to Carol, after which she artificially inseminated herself in the bathroom. Year 23. Agents from the FBI's fairly new behavioral science unit visit Ted numerous times. They want to know what makes a serial killer. One time, Ted tells an agent, "The fisherman drowns going underwater, but I can take you there without drowning, if I trust you and if I decide." Speaking of killing, Ted explains, it becomes possession. They're part of you. After a while, when you plan these, that person becomes a part of you, and you two are forever one. You feel the last bit of breath leaving their body. You're looking into their eyes, and basically, a person in that situation is God. You then possess them, and they shall forever be a part of you. Little by little, he tells them of the other victims, ones he's decapitated, heads he kept as trophies, bodies he caressed and slept with after shampooing their hair and putting lipstick on them. Year 27. Up to this point, Ted has confessed to 30 murders, but he's certainly killed more people than that, maybe even 100, but likely closer to 50. He's now finished talking to reporters, to psychologists, to his adoring fans. He's admitted what he used to do with those putrefying bodies, perhaps the hardest thing for him to admit, because it's so disgusting. Last a day. His head is now shaven. He's refused to eat the last meal of steak and eggs that's been handed to him. At age 42, right before Ted takes his final breaths in the electric chair, he shows again how warped and out of touch he is, when in his final words he says, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." The executioner sends 2,000 volts of current flowing through Ted's copper-lined skull cap. His fists clench as his body jolts. After a minute, a paramedic walks over to check his pulse. The silence is deafening. A few minutes later, Dr. Frank Kilgo walks up to Ted's still body and takes the hood from the head. As the witnesses watch, still in shock, some angry, some relieved, the doctor says, "He's dead. Now you need to hear about the ones who got away and how these sneaky serial killers finally got caught. Or have a look at who is the Zodiac Killer? Why was he never found, and other important things about him or her." Compilation.